So I grew up mostly in the Southeast in Atlanta, Georgia, and went to undergrad at Georgia Tech and really loved the sciences and always knew I wanted to do something in science. Growing up in Georgia, though, I really was into the CDC and thought that I was going to work there and be like a lab type of person and maybe do infectious diseases or something. But then during college, I spent a lot of time in the lab and realized that that was really not for me. And so then I spent lots of time volunteering in places like at Grady Hospital, which is their big catchment hospital in Atlanta, and fell in love with just medicine generally and taking care of patients. And I liked the patient and human interaction about all of it. So then ultimately, like towards the end of college, which is a little late for most people, I decided to go to med school. Went to med school in Atlanta and then made my way to internal medicine, just kind of liking the science of it, the patient care. I wasn't really a surgery type of person. So started into that, and then just through my rotations really fell in love with oncology generally. The relationships you get to make with people, the constantly evolving science, and the, constant new things to try in patients, new studies to start, but also how you can guide people through their journeys of cancer. And so ended up in oncology that way. And then through my fellowship, which I did here at the University of Colorado, I worked with some really good mentors, Dr. Jimeno and Dr. Bowles, who encouraged me to come to head and neck cancer. And so that became my specialty here. But I always wanted to keep a little bit of the academic teaching part and also a little bit more of a broad cancer treatment. And so I spent half of my time at the VA too, where I treat a little bit of everything. I don't know that I would say I would overcome this, but I think that managing my work-life balance has been my biggest challenge and continues to be, trying to figure out how you balance self-care and managing your family. I have 2 kids and I'm married, and then also taking care of patients and doing a good job, and then also doing research and making sure you're staying on top of that. And I don't know that I've found the answer to that. I think that I'm always letting 1 or 2 of those things fall to the side a little bit. But I think what I've found important is making sure that I always, focus on myself and my family, because if I don't do that, then I can't do well at work too. So I always keep them a priority, myself a priority as much as I can. And try to balance what I'm doing and try to be a little bit better about saying no to things that aren't, really fit with what I want to do, or, setting aside time. Like, yes, we may be on vacation and I don't really want to work, but maybe if I just spend like an hour or so, then I can still keep up with everything else. So just trying to find those balances, but it's still a struggle. It's still something that I'm constantly trying to figure out. So my first full-time job is still the same job that I have. So that is interesting, I guess, in a way. But I think what I would tell myself as I was starting up is to sometimes that it's okay to say no. You don't have to jump at every opportunity, that you should really spend time and focus on things that you're really interested in and really want to grow out. I think when I first started, I just said yes, 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 yes to everything, and I still am not great at that. But then you become so overwhelmed and can't get all of the things done. So it's okay to say no. It would be one thing. And the other thing that kind of with my prior answer that I would say is make sure you're leaving time for yourself too. Staying healthy and, finding time to exercise, finding time to sleep, finding all of those things is really important for you to be able to do all the other things you want to. And so you have to make room for that too. I already said I have a family. I love spending time with my kids. They're really into sports, so we spend a lot of time on the soccer field or the lacrosse field, which I enjoy mostly because I get to watch them and because it's outside. But for myself, I'm very active, love running, love hiking, love going on trips, outdoors, traveling, etc. So doing that, and then I also like to read, but reading for pleasure is not something that happens as much as I would like it to right now. I was just thinking about this, and I think some of this might be because we just celebrated the 4th of July, but I've always enjoyed the way that my family has celebrated the 4th of July. When I was growing up, my dad would always run the Peachtree Road Race in Atlanta, which is has, I think like 100,000 people running, and it felt like the whole city would line the streets and cheer for people. So it was always it made Atlanta feel like a smaller community where you're with everybody, and then you would, see fireworks after. And then I ran it myself when I was older, up until we moved here. And then here I've always really enjoyed what we have done, which is our neighborhood, Park Hill, has this really fun, crazy, silly parade. And the whole neighborhood, again, lines the streets, and there's people with their bikes, or people who've made their car into some kind of float, or like dance teams who walk down the street. And it just reminds you of the community you have that you don't always necessarily get to see from your day-to-day thing. I think that it's always been a holiday that has really made me feel where I live and appreciate it and fall in love with it again. I think not for, well, there's lots of specific cases, but I think that generally, like, overreaching for the past, it's 10 years that I've been in attending and a little bit longer in the cancer field, things have changed so much, and there's so many new treatments that we've come across, things like immunotherapy and targeted drugs, that I got to see while they were in a clinical trial and put patients on them who previously we had very few choices for. And then all of a sudden they have something like immunotherapy where maybe they're living for like years beyond what we would have ever expected. And so I have these patients who initially would have, said, like, we don't have very long to live. Now I get to see them getting married, meeting their grandchildren, doing bucket list trips and things like that. So I think that has kept both my research and clinical stuff going, is that I've gotten to see such big changes and people be able to celebrate so many points in their life that they would have previously never been able to. I think that having good mentorship is really important if you want to be a leader. So having people, as you're training or above you, even when you are a leader, who you can turn to when you don't know what to do, or you have questions or problems, is really important. And then also just treating all of those below you too, like you would have wanted to be treated by any of your leaders. I think that being able to work in a team is really important. And so getting just to work with a broad group of people and knowing how to interact with all of them and be a good teammate makes you a really good leader. And so I think I would really focus on that for anybody who wants to be in leadership. And then just back to everything I've said, being a leader is important, doing all of these other things is important, but you also need to take care of yourself while you're doing all those things. I would say that I could be wrong, in work that I come across relatively laid back and calm, but I'm actually extremely competitive. And so played sports growing up, was always very competitive, and even to this day, find pride if I can race my children and sprint and still beat them, which is drawing to a close. But any kind of board game, any kind of anything, I'm always very competitive and really want to play to win, which as I'm getting older and not as fast or not as athletically gifted, I've had to find other ways to enjoy sports and things like that. But that is something that I think that you would not maybe guess for me when you meet me in clinic.